Every day we think about Frank on set. He was such a big part of the show. He was my friend since 8th grade.
For 16 years, Mike Wolfe was one of the most recognizable faces on American television. The guy in the cargo van who could spot a forgotten motorcycle under 30 years of dust and know exactly what it was worth. That's the version of him most people know. But behind that enthusiastic image, Wolfe was quietly enduring one of the biggest public defamations in reality television. The surprising part is that he could have cleared his name instantly. Instead, he chose to stay silent for 3 years. During that time, his best friend of 40 years died in his arms. His marriage fell apart. A drunk driver nearly killed him. And through almost all of it, he let people believe he was the villain. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind one of American Picker's most recognizable stars, Mike Wolfe. Let's get into it. The boy who picked. Mike Wolfe was born in Joliet, Illinois in 1964. He was the second of 3 children raised by a single mother, Rita Wolfe, after his parents split when he was a toddler. Money was tight. Mike had to figure things out on his own. This is where 4-year-old Mike started pulling bicycles out of alley trash piles. Not because anyone asked him to, but because that is where the interesting things ended up. He cleaned his first bike so well that an older kid offered him $5 for it, and he took the deal without hesitation. Although his mother was furious when she found her garage filling up with his salvaged parts, she didn't make him stop. Instead, she gave him the space to keep going, telling him the garage was his now. That one decision made by a single mom planted the entire business model of his adult life. By his 20s, Wolfe was racing bicycles competitively and running 2 bike shops in Iowa. He financed the shops by selling a rare 1934 Harley-Davidson to a collector in Thailand. Mike eventually closed the shops, bought a cargo van, and spent nearly 2 decades logging upward of 60,000 miles a year, chasing what he called rusty gold. That instinct for spotting value before anyone else did eventually outgrew the back roads, and Mike decided to give it a permanent home. In 2000, he opened Antique Archaeology in LeClaire, Iowa. Mike used a machine shop as a storefront for everything he had been hauling for years. Around that time, he started filming his own trips and spent 5 more years pitching a television show based on that footage. When the History Channel finally said yes, it changed everything overnight, and nobody at the network saw it coming. What the show actually was, American Pickers, premiered on January 18, 2010, and pulled in 3.1 million viewers, the network's best debut in 3 years. By the end of Season 1, it was averaging 5.4 million viewers a week, occasionally outperforming American Idol in key demographics. The premise of the show barely needed explaining. 2 guys drive around the country buying things other people had decided were finished with. What made the show memorable was the relationship between Wolfe and his co-star, Frank Fritz. Fritz had been his friend since 8th grade, and their chemistry read differently than most reality TV partnerships precisely because it was not built for the cameras. It had already existed for 2 decades before any TV show came around. Danielle Colby, running the home base shop in LeClaire, gave the show a steady center while Wolfe and Fritz were out on the road. For over a decade, that combination made American Pickers one of the History Channel's biggest hits. Then, in the middle of a global pandemic, the partnership that had carried the show for 11 years started falling apart, and nobody watching had any idea what was actually happening. The feud. In July 2021, Frank Fritz's departure from American Pickers was announced, and the press built a feud narrative that neither man corrected. Fritz told reporters the show had been tilted entirely toward Wolfe. He said the two had not spoken in 2 years and suggested that Wolfe was replacing him with his younger brother. Wolfe posted a warm message about missing his old friend, and Fritz publicly dismissed it as hollow. The real story did not come out until after Fritz's death in September 2024, when Wolfe finally told People magazine what had actually happened. During the pandemic, Fritz injured his back and went through surgery. The combination of recovery time, a romantic breakup, and total isolation created what Wolfe called a perfect storm. Fritz became addicted to opioids, Wolfe and people close to Fritz staged an intervention. It did not hold. When filming resumed and the network required clean drug tests as a condition of returning, Fritz could not provide them. The decision to part ways was made by History Channel, not by Wolfe. Wolfe chose to let himself be cast as the villain rather than expose a friend to public judgment over something Wolfe felt was never his story to tell. That decision cost him 3 years of a reputation he knew was false. It is also, by his own account, the reason he was able to forgive Fritz so easily when they eventually spoke again. He understood it was not his friend, but the addiction that had made Fritz bitter and resentful. What the public did not know was that while Wolfe was busy protecting Fritz's image, his own life was starting to come apart at home. When life hit all at once, Wolfe married Jody Faith in September 2012. The ceremony was themed around the film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Their daughter Charlie was born the same year. For most of the show's biggest decade, the Wolfe household was the stable backdrop to a career built on the road. That stability ended in June 2020 when the couple separated, with Jody filing for divorce that November, citing irreconcilable differences. The settlement, finalized in 2021, reportedly included a multi-year alimony arrangement and divided their properties. The details of what actually went wrong inside the marriage were kept private by mutual choice. By 2022, Wolfe was seeing Letitia Klein, a former model and motorcycle enthusiast whose interests overlapped naturally with his own world of vintage vehicles and open roads. The two appeared together publicly, including at a film premiere in Los Angeles in March 2025. Meanwhile, Frank Fritz's health had been declining for years. The stroke he suffered in 2022 left him partially paralyzed and unable to make his own legal decisions. He spent much of the time afterward in long-term care. Wolfe visited him regularly. When Fritz died in September 2024, Wolfe was at his bedside, having told him he was not angry with him and that he loved him. Wolfe closed his friend's eyes himself, then waited until after the obituaries ran before telling the public the version of the feud that was actually true. 12 months later, with the grief still fresh, Wolfe came close to losing his own life as well. The crash. On September 12, 2025, Wolfe was driving a vintage Porsche through Columbia, Tennessee, with Letitia Klein beside him when a driver pulled out from a side street directly into their path. The force of the impact was so high that the steering wheel broke. Wolfe and Klein were taken to the hospital. Wolfe was released the next day with a broken nose and stitches. Klein's injuries were far more severe: a broken jaw, fractured ribs, a broken sternum, and a collapsed lung. She went through extensive surgeries and a long recovery period. The driver of the car that crashed into them was later charged with DUI and vehicular assault. Wolfe called surviving it a second chance, a phrase that carried more weight given everything the previous 2 years had already taken from him. 3 months later, in December 2025, Danielle Colby posted a birthday video describing American Pickers as finished, calling it a financial crossroads. Headlines ran within hours. Wolfe responded that the show was still part of his future plans, and the History Channel confirmed there was no truth to a full cancellation. They said it was only a pause while Wolfe completed a new project. That project, History's Greatest Picks, premiered in February 2026. It is built around the stories behind significant American objects. Season 27 of American Pickers is still running, and it was dedicated to Frank Fritz. Today, at 61, Wolfe is co-parenting his teenage daughter, recovering from the crash, hosting a new series, and still running antique archaeology in LeClaire after closing the Nashville store earlier in 2025. He has described this chapter of his life with the same phrase he has used for decades about the things he finds in barns. This still has value, and the story is not finished yet. Mike Wolfe spent years letting the public believe the worst about himself rather than exposing a dying friend's private struggle. He watched his married life fall apart and survived a crash that nearly took his own life. None of that ever made it into the highlight reel of barns and motorcycles that he's famous for. So after hearing all this, what do you think the real cost of that silence was for Wolfe? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.